one of the most important places to start at is where we are at. And the ambassador mentioned something really, really important about democracy and debt. In a continent that depends on debt as much as we do, it's very, very important to paint a contextual picture about why we're there. And we're there, I'm not very diplomatic. Just need to give the disclaimer. We are there because we have a generation of leaders on the continent who are about self-preservation and preservation of power, more than they are about the good of the continent. So I think we can't have the conversation without that context. We can't have a conversation about young people and their participation in democratic institutions and in democracy without realizing that and without being real about that. I recently, in a conversation with a colleague who's a minister, was really, really disheartened when she was sharing about an opportunity that existed in the UN where there would be an election of a body that was going to sit in the UN, and the African cohort of ministers had agreed on a particular country that would then represent Africa on that body. When the time came to vote, South Africa and that particular country were the only ones who voted in that way. The others were bribed and voted for a representative from the UAE. Now, it is disheartening because that is personal gain being put ahead of such a much bigger agenda, which is getting Africa into the room, which is having Africa have a seat at the table. I share this because the context is important. We have that reality, and like I said, what the ambassador said about debt is important because we then find ourselves in a cycle where, because it is easier to borrow to maintain patronage, because ultimately that's what the borrowing is for, you then have leaders that don't make decisions that are good for young people, that are good for the next generation, that are good for citizens. The borrowing that keeps us in a loop, that is about making sure they keep patronage, they keep power, they fund bureaucracy, because if you have people who are in your patronage ecosystem and the bureaucratic system, that's how you sustain power, versus using that debt to actually fund